For anyone that doesn't know, town planning has its origins back to Roman times, where you plan and develop and subdivide with some consideration or some order. Planning is full of maybes, maybe in respect to the merits of the application. And it's something that drives people outside of the fraternity absolutely nuts. Perth has got some ongoing growing pains. We can't continue expanding outwards. What I tell my own kids is that in your generation, you've got to think strategically and ahead. Have we started already?
Yeah. We're right in, Joe. We hear so many negative things about the city, about how population affects us, cost of living crises and so on. But our outlook in Perth is very, very positive. I've invited Joe Algeri, a town planner, to talk to us about how they think about planning strategically, the opportunities in population growth and in property, and it's looking pretty good. And for the younger generation, I don't feel concerned. I think you're going to be able to buy a place. I think you're going to be okay. Tune in and have a listen.
I like that. It's just, we're straight into it.
Yeah. Tell me about town planning, because you're a town planner by career. I know you're a musician, or previously were.
Yep.
I think once you're a musician, you never stop being a musician, but
Correct.
That's an aside.
Yeah.
But town planning, most of the people I know, I'm pretty sure, wouldn't even know what that really is.
And it's funny you should say that, because what irks me is when there's documents to be witnessed and they give you a list of professions, which includes accountants, surveyors, pharmacists. People come to my office sometimes and they go, "Can't you authorise my signature?" I say, "No, because we're not on the list." Town planning is still a great unknown for a lot of people, and particularly so in Western Australia compared to the rest of the country, because we've always been a little bit cut off here, and some people call it the Wild West, and development, and particularly land development, was and still is to a large degree in the hands for a few well-known individuals. And people think, don't surveyors do that sort of stuff? What do I need you for? So for anyone that doesn't know, town planning has its origins back to Roman times, where you plan and develop and subdivide with some consideration or some order. And there's a huge bureaucracy that's behind it in terms of what they call policy and planning frameworks. And it's even hard for me to navigate through it all. And I'm meant to be an expert at it at my age. So it surprises some people in terms of what town planning is and what town planners do.
So how would you describe town planning at a high level?
At a higher level, it is, oh God, I should have been prepared for this one. It is the orderly and proper approach to development or the subdivision of land. You just simply can't decide that you want to build a block of flats and you just contact a builder and you start building it. You just don't decide, I'm going to subdivide my block in half, and you call in a fencing contractor. So it's about an orderly process, and that concept of orderly and proper planning comes up all the time in tribunal decisions. And it's got a fairly long-winded definition via way of case law, but anything to do with development or subdivision is really town planning.
At a high level, so in my head, I think of town planning as, and I describe it, if I look at the city of Perth, we go, okay, we're expanding, we think the population is going to increase by another X amount of million people.
Yep.
Where are we going to put them?
Correct.
What land needs to be released to build houses on?
Correct.
We need road infrastructure, we need power, we need water, we need sewer. There's a whole bunch of things, and to me that is part of town planning.
It is. There's really two limbs. What you're talking about is strategic planning.
Yes.
And that's producing plans and policies and frameworks for the future. So we can do exactly what you said, accommodate for growth, which is quite critical in this state. The statutory planning is the here and now, looking at or preparing specific applications. Okay, you want to do that mixed-use development in Wembley. Is it going to work? Does it comply with the frameworks? Does it need to be revised? So that's, you can broadly split planning into statutory, the here and now, and the strategic, the future planning.
The statutory is linked to strategic though, isn't it? Because that mixed development in Wembley and some of your decision making around whether you approve that or not is linked to the strategic development,
Absolutely.
I would imagine. Right?
And that's an ongoing conversation with my colleagues because for a period, those two bubbles didn't have any overlap. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, one very much informs the other on an ongoing and cyclical basis.
So and it affects me if I'm either a developer or even if I'm an individual who says, I'm going to go and buy that block and stick 4 units on it or 4 villas on it. That whole view from the strategic planning through to the statutory regulations and requirements are going to affect whether I should or shouldn't.
Absolutely.
Because it's the economic feasibility for me is what's important as an individual. If I go and do that, is it going to make a buck or not? And that could depend on whether on that subdivision there are a whole bunch of rules which adds cost to me developing there as opposed to doing it in Wembley.
Absolutely. And one of the more difficult tasks I have to do for a client or our consultancy does is when we undertake due diligence in exactly that scenario. You say, Joe, I've got this piece of land. What do you reckon? Will I get 40 units out of it? Now, the problem with the planning framework, and I avoid using the words rules because rules would suggest that those requirements are black and white. The beauty and the frustrating thing about planning is that there is no black and white. It's hues of grey. It's the exercise of discretion. Planning is full of maybes. Maybe in respect to the merits of the application. And it's something that drives people outside of the fraternity absolutely nuts, both proponents and even third parties like objectors. They just say, I just want you to tell me if we can do it or not. And I say in a number of words, maybe we're going to have to suck it and see because there's so many multiple layers that inform assessment and decision making, and there's a lot of discretion inbuilt. So it frustrates proponents. Equally, it frustrates third parties. For example, neighbours who are not particularly keen on this idea of this block being developed, never have been, and they ask the same question: does it comply or doesn't it, or doesn't? And you've got to say, maybe. We've got to look at it. I can form an opinion, but I cannot predetermine with 100% accuracy whether this has got legs in terms of an approval.
So what do people come to you for?
They come to me to navigate through exactly that process. You can't do it on your own. Long gone are the days where you fill out a form, your draftsperson draws up a plan of the development of the subdivision. You've got to address the framework. You've got to address and justify the areas of discretion, otherwise big or small. Surprisingly, people are surprised when I tell them we do a lot of change of use applications. So you've got an old commercial tenancy in Mount Lawley. It probably would have had a plethora of different uses over the years, but someone wants to jump from office to hairdresser. That often needs planning approval. And even beyond planning approval, then you've got requirements under the National Construction Code or the Building Code of Australia, and people are wholly shocked that it's not a case of just telling council that we're a hairdresser now. So people need help with that sort of stuff. So our clients are either the mum and dad proponents, whether it's because they want to build a single house or they're having trouble with their additions to a single house. They might also be doing their own infill development. They've bought a block where you can subdivide and put a new unit at the back. Then you've got your more corporate clients, corporate developers, and certainly in our business, we undertake services for local and state government, and my particular background is what they call applications for review or appeals in the old language at the State Administrative Tribunal. So I help both applicants and respondents, either with mediation services, expert evidence if it goes to trial or a hearing, and representation. So I do that a fair bit, and I've got a lot of experience in that space because this tribunal has set up a class of appeal or a class 1 where you can elect that no lawyers be involved. And
that's got to be a good thing.
It does. It creates a bush lawyer like me. I dress and talk like one, but I'm not.
So you can be an advocate for what I want to do.
Absolutely.
So, Joe, I want to build that mixed-use development in Wembley.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be, there's a stack of paperwork, but there might be some objection. Can you help me with it?
Yeah. I use the word advocate only in relation to the tribunal because in that role, I'm just putting on the table every argument possible as to why it should proceed or why it is a proposal of merit, and someone else would be giving expert evidence. As a consultant dealing with day-to-day applications, I'll do that, but it will have its limits. Otherwise, it affects my professional credibility. So part of my service will be, no, Hanif, this is not going to work. It sucks. Go back to your architect. Take that top floor off because we can give it a red hot go, but I just don't think it's going to fly. Right?
But that's valuable because ultimately they've saved me a lot of money, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because we've all got different personality types, and it always surprises me, including, fairly experienced. Well, I'll use the word developers. If you do one application, you're a developer, but people with fairly considerable property portfolios, you think would have learned a thing or two over the years, but they stubbornly say it's my way or it's not going to happen. And that extends not only to development but, to tenancies. The amount of tenancies I see that are empty that go on for years always amuses me, but there's a certain personality type involved behind that.
Mm. You've got some stats to share with us.
I have, and some of them are quite alarming. They won't be alarming. That probably won't be of any great surprise. One thing I often get asked about is what's happening with property prices, and I can give my opinion, but I'm not a valuer. But I hear from my clients and through the media. I get asked about vacancy rates, particularly in the retail, but also in the commercial space. And like everyone else, I just go to the statistics that you can find through CoreLogic or anyone else. But I've got some fairly recent ones. And as of today, they're going to be in a somewhat random order. There are 3,131 homes on the market in the Perth region. So this is on for sale.
That's incredibly low.
Yeah, it should be about 12,000, right? Median rent at the moment, and this is sort of a combination between houses and apartments, is about is $680 per week. That one surprised me a little. I haven't rented for a long time. There's 2,404 properties available for rent, and that's vacancy rate of about 1.3. Just to counter that with a reference point, in about 2016, 17, it was up at nearly at 10%. So that indicates how quickly, or reasonably quickly, the market can change. So a new build for a unit on average is about $650,000. A new build price for a median house is about $790,000. So when you correlate that back to what the median house price is, and if we get a drum roll, I actually think that's $770. I can't. I'm used to reading things from a screen, not from paper. So I think the median house price has gone up 22% in the last year, or something along those lines.
It's about that, Joe.
Yeah, March. Sorry. So this is from the March quarter, 770, and that was up 22% at that time at year to date. That's huge. That's huge. Great news if you own property and you own your own home, but not so good for the young ones that want to get into the market.
But we've said that for years, and every generation says that.
Yeah.
So why is it different saying it today in 2025 than it was in 1998?
Yep. Because the world's a different place. And you hear these arguments on, in the media, on social media. I'm sick of hearing about Gen Xers and Boomers talking about the young ones having avocado on toast. But that's part of the reason. In the world, we've got different expectations. And I think from my own perspective, life is more complex now. We've got a lot more options. We've got a lot more technology. I think about when I was in my 20s, I didn't have a mobile phone that I had to take care of every month. I'm not that old. By the end of the 20s, I had one. You didn't have Netflix. You didn't have Prime. You didn't have Spotify. I fear for my own kids that it's serfdom again. We're becoming serfs to corporations because money's going out of your pocket every month. The interest rate argument is a really interesting one also, because I distinctly recall my parents buying farmland in early 1987, and they were paying 17.75%, which was eye-watering when you saw the statement about how much you were paying, but the price of property was less then. So what I tell my own kids is that in your generation, you've got to think strategically and ahead. Buying a property buying a property young is not the end of your life. If you're smart in the way you go about it, once you're in the market and comfortable, you might find the rest of your life a lot easier, that you're not just a slave to a mortgage because you only decided to do something about it in your 30s, or when you got married, or when you decided to have children. So there's always ways to go about it, but it does require some consideration now about how you're going to do it. What are you going to buy? You're going to be living in it yourself? You're going to be spending some time at home? Is it worth going up bush to taking on that job which gives you an extra 50 grand a year and living expenses? Maybe that for 18 months will be worth it in the long run. So there's always ways of getting into the market. I tell people and my own kids. From a cultural perspective, and I think across the Western world though, I can see the middle class diminishing where, like I said, you didn't have to think about these things. You just assumed that when you were ready to settle down, you could go to the bank, get a loan, and away you go. I think the gap between rich and poor will continue to broaden at expense of what I think the middle class is, and I don't think that's good for any country or any economy.
So I'm going to go back to planning for a minute.
Yep.
And your perspectives on it sounds incredibly bureaucratic.
Yes.
And there might be reasons for part of it. I always say bureaucracy does have a place, but once it oversteps its usefulness, productivity just dives and costs go up because it is a great generator of expense. Where have we got it wrong?
I don't know if we get anything fundamentally wrong, because we are all a product of our time in terms of our collective thinking, our individual thinking, the politics of the day. And I'll give you a quick example. Have we always got heritage right? No. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, we were knocking down buildings left, right and centre because we were a little outpost so remote from the rest of the world that we wanted to be a big city. So there was no consideration of this is actually a really beautiful building and we should save it. We just wanted to grow and thrive. That's, of course, different now. We will lament that. But that was a product of the thinking of the time. Was taking the Fremantle rail line away in the late 70s a smart decision? Absolutely not. But at the time it made sense because congestion wasn't an issue and it was losing money for the government. So you can always reflect back on to decisions which vaguely associated with planning and say, well, that's what we've got it wrong, but we've got it wrong there. But planning's never static. Unfortunately, that bureaucracy is constantly evolving. We're always looking back and we're always looking forward. That's what planning essentially does. We look back and we look forward. But where we are in Perth, I think also warrants a little bit of discussion. One thing, a statistic I often tell people is that about 1 million persons is the idyllic suburban city. And at 1 million persons, as Perth was for a number of decades, most people can live in a single house with some sort of yard. Most people can have a car and drive conveniently to wherever they need to go, day or night, weekend or workday, park conveniently, and then come back home again. That was Perth for a long time post-war. And we hit 1 million, I think, in the second or third quarter of 1981. And from that moment onwards, we surpassed the optimum suburban city size. But many folks, certainly my age and older, still want that city where we all live in a house. Not that many of us want a yard anymore, but some people like to. We love our cars. We want to drive conveniently wherever and whenever. And we want to park there conveniently and cheaply. You can't do that anymore with the city with the size that we are now. And I don't even have the latest figure. Because we've got problems where if we're going to expand like LA, and we love our coastline, so we're sort of going north and south. We're trying to go east in bits, but that's quite controversial. So a lot of people like living on the coast. A lot of people still like the idea of their own house. But we're at Elkamos. In fact, one of my staff lives up in Elkamos. And we're heading south. They're trying to keep the distinction between the metro area and Mandurah, but I'm worried it's going to be blink and you'll miss it.
It's almost there now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So the freeway, it feels like they're constantly adding a lane, and by the time they finish it, it's full of traffic again. And that will continue to be the situation as the city grows. And then if you start having a side debate about, well, why is it growing so quickly, then you've got to have a debate about immigration. And I say to people, the prosperity either you share individual or that we all share collectively in some way is because of growth.
Yes, it is. Yep.
I get frustrated when people think the solution is to stop immigration. They have no idea what the consequences are, both external and from over east. And I did have a stat on there somewhere. I think we get 12,000. Oh, I don't want to get this wrong. 13,000 net population growth in the December quarter was 13,980 people. So that's tied with prosperity. So Perth has got some ongoing growing pains. We can't continue expanding outwards. We have to some degree. Infill is controversial. People want the areas that they live in to remain as they are. It's human nature that we don't like uncertainty. So that's one of the big challenges. Tied with that is our vehicle use. People complain, I'd use the bus, but it never bloody comes, and there's Deros on there. And I'm thinking it can only get better when more people use it. But if you've got a car, you'll use it. So that's a legacy of the beautiful suburban city that many of us grew up in, or parents and grandparents. So we're planning very much is dealing with those growing pains that we're becoming a different city, which is both good and bad, which is probably why Lost Perth has got so many members on social media. And it's interesting for me, a lot of people just think we should have left it as it was without thinking about the consequences. Why did they change that? It was so much better then. We put our rose-coloured glasses on. So planning very much deals with the growing pains.
And in all of that, there's opportunity. And I think, especially for the younger generation, because it's their city as much as it is ours, and they're going to live in it longer than we are.
Absolutely.
So where does the opportunity lie in all of that, Joe? What does it look like?
The broadest level, growth. There will be some growth in most sectors, of whether we're talking about property market or otherwise. You've got to look at the worst case scenarios. We've been through plenty of slumps, but you quickly come out of them. What seems to happen is that it's stagnant for a long time. I think about this century, we had that incredible boom of the mid-noughties that lasted to about 2007. Then we had the global financial crisis. We had sort of another peak after that. But then in the 10s, there was this great lull. I can remember from about 2014 to 2009.
And it was just plateau, wasn't it? It was flat.
Plateau. And you think,
We didn't go anywhere.
And then COVID changed everything. I've been busy and my firm has been busy along with every other firm in planning and along with a lot of other disciplines since COVID. Federal government, for good reason, because we didn't know what was going to happen, pumped a lot of money into the economy. And to this day, we're still feeling the effects of that. People decided to get on and do stuff. So to answer your question, you've got to make some sort of projection or guess about where growth is going to be. And then you think, all right, how do I get a piece of the action here? What can I buy or what can I develop that's going to give me a reasonable return? So there's plenty of opportunities out there.
So talk to me about development opportunity, and not from the perspective of a big developer, because there are only very few of them, but most of our audience are people like you and I who say, I could buy a block and develop a couple of a triplex on it, or I could buy a block and develop a small apartment block. How do I find them? Is there actually opportunity there? How do I go about assessing what the process might look like and doing some sort of feasibility to answer my question of, is that even worth it?
Yeah. You've got to do some research on your own, or you've got to pay someone to give you advice on that. And that's where we come in. I don't want the audience to think for a minute that you can go, say, to areas of the city of Belmont or Victoria Park where it's already zoned for infill subdivision or development and think there's a quick buck to be made buying a place, dressing up the place at the front, clearing the block at the back and either selling it or building. I probably don't need to tell you one of the consequences of COVID was materials shortage initially and the inflationary effect of that, and then the labour shortage. Every second week we're still hearing about builders going broke because they lock in a contract price and then they just can't honour it. And that's still a problem. So there's not big bucks to be made unless you're already in the industry by doing that, learning where you can cut corners, learning where there is money to be saved. However, if the market's on the up, and by virtue of the fact that you're in the market, one thing I remember about the noughties is people who had absolutely no idea what they were doing and what should have taken 12 months took 3 years. But in that 3 years, there was capital growth, and then they had bragging rights about how much money they made because of their development or subdivision. So there's a little bit of luck involved where you catch the cycle of the market. But you've got to take a punt as well as a last point I'll make on that question. If you want the certainty if it's already zoned, there will be some money to be made, but the real money makers are those that have got time and they think that particular scheme's pretty old, and from what I know about, the latest strategic plans from the government, I think they're going to up the zoning there. It might take 3 or 4 years, but I'm going to take a punt. I'm going to buy a property, and I've got a good feeling that it will change from R20, which is the density code that we use under what they call the R codes, to R40 or R60. All of a sudden, you might make your money not by subdividing it, not by developing it, but by having a property that had the potential for 1 additional dwelling or 2 group dwellings or 2 single houses. And now all of a sudden you can have 4. That's where you start to make the real money. The other one is where you also take a risk where the advice is this land is only capable of 6 slots. It's got an overlaying structure plan that says as much. You get a good planner involved and they say to you, well, maybe we can redo this. We might have an issue with the lot frontage. We might have an issue with the minimum or the average lot size, but we've actually got a good argument to make in the context of what's already around. So some of the more speculative developments, they might bear fruit, but they will also cost money. So a lot depends on your budget, your timeframes, and how lucky you are. Because at the end of the day, I often hear from my clients that irrespective of what you tell them professionally, a good entrepreneur still has some gut instinct. And I know my own family, my parents, grandparents, they don't know anything about town planning, very little about tax law. They don't want to know. But at some point, talk to people, try and understand it, but you've got to go with your gut. And there's a little bit of luck involved. But there's opportunities out there.
And I think if subdivision continues to be a thing, I imagine it would, because where are we going to put all the people?
Yeah.
Right?
No planner is saying we can't have greenfields anymore. We just got to the point where it's got to be more than just greenfields, because then there's real problems about the size of the city and how you service it. So it's just not as easy as it was, but it's still there. It's still there.
Yeah, I've still got clients doing it. Yep. Yeah. And I think you're right. It's a risk profile, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So if you said, look, I can take I've got enough money to take a risk.
Yep.
I can sit with this one. Or you say, well, I don't, and my risk profile is low, so I'll pay more, pay a premium to reduce risk.
Yep.
And I'll do that. I'll buy that block in Vic Park.
Yep.
And I might only make 50 or 60 grand on it, but
Yep.
I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, yeah, risk. Timeframes, what's your budget? How much you prepared to gamble up front, or do you need that return so you can take that next step?
Yep. What about apartments? Where do they sit in the planning sphere?
They're very much vital to what I call infill, so to the areas where, and you can see that all around. I tie that back to the cultural element of Perth being the ultimate suburban city, because a lot of people, singles, couples, they want to live in a 4x2,
Yep.
right? Whereas if you've got experiences or some connection to Europe or other parts of the world, it's changing now. You've got a lot more people today interested or living or comfortable with the idea of apartments. And I think because of our demographics, my parents' generations, the baby boomers, a lot of them have come around to the fact that apartments ain't so bad for a whole host of reasons. They love having gardens. Like my own parents, they love the fact they've got a whole market garden, they've got a whole farm. But once you're physically not capable of looking after the outdoor space of your dwelling, then they're no different than millennials who just aren't interested. They just want a nice house. The other one that's happening, and I've noticed this a while ago, is once they lose their licenses or choose to no longer drive, that beautiful house you built in the 80s in Duncraig is no good to you, because we end up having that conversation about public transport. So it's as much a cultural, there's a cultural element to apartment living in Perth as it is more than just planning. The stats go up and down, whether apartments are surging ahead in terms of capital growth versus houses. It's pretty steady. They're always going to be and will continue to increasingly be in the mix for residential living in Perth. We've got no choice, basically. And a lot of people voluntarily will make that choice, where if they've got a nice 2 or 3 bedroom apartment whereby they can walk to the street and head to nice cafes, shops, nice restaurants, if they can commute conveniently or get to work, then it's a great solution for some people, but it's not for everyone. So we need that mix going forward in Perth.
Do you have a view of what our city might look like in 20 years' time?
I think a lot of the fundamentals will be the same, but what you'll start to get is, I'll give you a great example, Applecross near the Canning Bridge area. People are lamenting, or some people are lamenting, the fact that we've got skyscrapers there now.
Yep.
Right? And I get that, but it's fundamentally still the same. You've still got Canning Highway going through it. You've still got the foreshore. You're going to see a lot more of that in places like Vic Park. It's been a long, long, tortuous road for places like Scarborough, but invariably you will see a lot more of that. You will get better public transport networks. So I live in South Perth. The 210 bus I can literally see from my office window. But it only comes every 12 minutes most of the time, which is nuts. I should be able to just walk out and think, less than 5 minutes, there'll be a bus here. Public transport slowly will start to improve, but that will only come at a tipping point, irrespective of government or political decisions, when it's no longer going to be convenient to actually drive and particularly park. So much like apartment living, these things are part of cultural change, so it will be progressive. It won't be radical. The last thing I've got to say on that question is that there was mutterings all last century about this idea of, hey, at some point, do we need a new city? Should we put all our efforts into Bunbury or Geraldton or Albany or something from scratch? They are interesting conversations in themselves, but they're risky and they don't always work.
But Bunbury's, they've poured a lot of money into Bunbury, as an example.
Yeah, they have. I've got a soft spot for Bunbury, but it's got bad reputation because of the suburbanisation of Bunbury. And downtown Bunbury, I lament the fact that there's just nothing happening. A lot of the shops, a lot of the retail's vacant. Talking about what went wrong and bad planning decisions, they should never have suburbanised the train station. It was totally logical when they did it in the 70s or the early 80s. But they've got a beautiful old train station right where it should be, in the city centre. It's where all the tourists should first get off going to the southwest. But it's in a suburb somewhere where you wouldn't want to spend more than 2 minutes there at night time. So that's where planning, in a broad sense, gets things wrong. And that conversation will continue because of the rapid growth. We've gone from, not only 250 years ago to a few million. And you look at the trajectory of European cities, they're millennia old. So there's always going to be challenges with rapid growth. And with those challenges also come opportunities if you're an investor or a developer.
Or even in business.
Absolutely.
It's good. When people talk about the trajectory of Perth, they go, well, keep in mind the population's growing and it will continue to grow.
Absolutely.
When you get a growing population, there's more demand for goods and services.
Absolutely. Yep. And that, for me at least in my industry, that's been quite pronounced post-COVID. I haven't had a quiet day in 5 years, quite literally. Phone keeps ringing. There's just plenty of work out there for everyone. So I'm not competing with any of my colleagues in other consultancies except for staff. So great time to be a young planner.
Staff is a thing though, isn't it? Because across business, if we talk business for a minute, the availability of a choice of a number of people is very low.
And I've had to make the tough decision where I've politely said no to jobs which I could have otherwise done 5 or 10 years ago, simply because I didn't have the resources to deal with it, or that the resources I would need to apply to it at my cost base means I wasn't going to make a profit. And they're hard. As a business owner, that's hard when you say no to work that you know you can do, but you need time to do it, and you've got to make some sort of buck out of the end of it. Otherwise, you're just working for work's sake.
Yeah. Or even worse, you're working and it's costing you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic. Some advice for younger people. I think we're all okay in our generation. Seems to be a great trajectory in this city, certainly for the next 5 to 10 years, and we're okay. We're all set up. But what about for the younger guys and girls coming through?
As I said earlier, do your own planning. That doesn't mean come to see me, but where do you want to be? And it's a horrible thing and it's such a cliche. Where do you want to be in 5 years? I think as a young person, you have to do that. It's regrettable that long gone are the days where you say, don't worry about it until you're ready to settle down. Where do you want to go? How are you going to get there? What other changes are on the horizon? The big one for me at the moment, and in fact I participated in a conference yesterday, is how's AI going to affect my industry? It's worth keeping an eye on that because that's going to escalate far beyond me staying up late at night looking at Sasquatch and Yeti AI reels and finding them hilarious.
That's a great insight into your personality, Joe.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Because planning is quite complicated, I don't think AI is going to destroy it. It's going to help a lot in terms of assessment and decision making. So I've got my eye on that. Think about how AI affects your particular profession and your industry. There's some interesting things coming there. Look ahead. As I said earlier, it's always good to look behind. What have you learnt from the past, both good and bad, your mistakes or otherwise, and look ahead. And then just to throw a spanner at the works, at some point you've got to stop being preoccupied with that and have a few moments where you live for now. So sounds a bit whimsical, but
I don't think so. I think people. I was saying to Jeremy earlier today, I think I have great hope and faith in the younger generation. I reckon they're better than us for a number of reasons. They're different.
yeah,
They've grown up in a different environment. You alluded to it.
Yeah.
But I think if they could take advantage of our experience and some guidance, they can make a great job of it.
but that you could apply that to every generation. We're all different. They're a product of their time, like we were. But I think you're right. I'm not pessimistic about the future because the future will be a different place than the past. As long as we learn something about the past. It's also an age thing where you tend to become a little bit more philosophical and you'd love to give advice. And I always remind myself it's easier to talk about things rather than to live them. It's like when people sometimes corner me at a conference or at a party, tell them I've been busy about how hard I'm working, and they start lecturing me about work-life balance. I just want to punch them in the nose. I know what they're saying is right, but then you're thinking, who are you to tell me? And I can empathise with young people, even my own kids, when they're hearing dad, bleat on about what you should do, things he's done or the things he should have done, blah, blah, blah. That's part of life, But yeah, I don't ever corner me about talking to me about work-life balance.
I'll keep that in mind, Joe. I like my nose the way it is. Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
You're most welcome.
Good to have a chat.
Hopefully there was something interesting there for you and the audience.
I think a bunch of things, and one of the takeaways for me is the positivity. Everyone talks about it. I think it's a human thing that we anchor around the things that are negative and we ignore the data and the facts that the city's growing.
Yeah.
And we are a prosperous city. We've got more disposable income per capita than in any other city in Australia.
Absolutely.
We've got so much opportunity in the breadth of business. I like the fact that apartments are going up because they're a cheaper price point, which
Absolutely.
means can you get into property? Yes. You might, and your point's right, you might have to just do it differently.
Yep.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Just find your way forward. You don't have to start with the perfect.
No, not at all. And you'll be okay.
Yep.
I think that's a great takeaway.
Great. Thanks,
Thanks,
you.
Joe.
Lovely
Good
talking
on
to
you.
you.